Got a Reddit question here asking again, what was the nature of Access Graphics work? No doubt this is an individual looking to try to dig more into John and the nature of his business. And we've discussed in some instances, maybe even potentially conspiracy theories, the nature of his work. But I want to talk a little bit more about the motivation. And so this question is very simply asking, what was the nature of Access Graphics work? And we know that John was considered the entrepreneur of the year, and he sort of created from 3 companies that he worked to put together with others, and sort of being the CEO, was able to kind of create Access Graphics from the advanced product group. I don't know what the advanced product group did, but apparently something with computers. And so this individual is saying, yes, they just resold computers. Of course, that's a very simple and basic answer. But like I said, trying to understand more of the motivation in terms of if we can understand what John did for a living, how can we see in what he was surrounded with more about John? Can we now see more about Patsy? Possibly. And so sort of the place that I want to start is when we talk about what John did is one possible exception is that if somebody wants to point out how Lockheed had been selling off its computer industry. And so this is the point in which John has already, Access Graphics has already been purchased by Lockheed Martin. They did really well, and they were purchased by Lockheed Martin. And I think they were in talks at this point to sell to GE. And so it's 96 going into 97, I believe, 1996 going into 1997. And so we're nearing the 2000s, where we kind of start circulating around the .com bubble. Again, like we mentioned earlier, this is when the internet was sort of fairly new in a way in which, you could throw up any .com and you'd get investors wanting to invest in this new technology. And so this individual says, I don't know how much of this sort of selling off the computer portion or the computer part of Lockheed Martin had anything to do with the .com bubble, but we do know that obviously in the 90s, 2000s, they let most of their computer division go. And so I talked about in a previous video how John was speaking, even though he was going to be replaced. He was going to GE. He's at the Christmas party, I think on the 21st of December, and he's going to be replaced, or he's going to move back, as he's telling people he's going to move back in his role as consultant to once the sale goes through for GE. And this is saying that John was informed that by the end of 95, early 96, that Lockheed Martin was planning to put Access Graphics up for sale. And so what this is saying is that John really already knew that the company was going up for sale sort of almost a year and some change in advance before it went up for sale in 97 to GE. And I think somewhere someone said that sale wasn't complete until a year later, after the Ramsey case, after everything went down with JonBenet. The sale wasn't complete. I think I read somewhere. Maybe we'll run into it a little bit later. But my point here is that John very well knew about the sale. And so again, I come back to my question. Why was John saying very hopefully that this company went to $1 billion? We got to $1 billion. We made it $1 billion in sales, $1 billion in revenue. let's push for 2 billion. I understand wanting to push the company's narrative. Maybe GE or Lockheed is saying, hey, continue to act as if you are the CEO. Continue to act, even though we're going to push you down in a consultant's role, continue to act as if you are the CEO. And if you were the CEO, what would you say? Of course. But I think that, and it's my opinion that if you were, I feel like you would have used different language. Instead of saying, oh, we're going to 2 billion, you would know that because you don't know how the company is going to operate. But maybe you might say, hey, let's keep up the good work. That's what I would expect John to say. So I don't understand whether a battery was put in his back, even though he knew that he was not going to, basically, you're not going to be a part of the growth in this company. You're just going to consult. And by consult, a lot of times when they say you're a consultant, that just means we need to call you. We call you when we need to. Just tell us how this works. Tell us what this spreadsheet means. That's what you're supposed to be here for. That's what you do. But you're not really involved in any part of the company. So I don't understand why the company would keep him on to tell him to lead the people in this direction as if he's going to be there for the 2 billion. Let's move on so I can make my point here. In the transcripts, one can see where John explains that when he was told this, he became concerned that he would be replaced as president of the company once Lockheed Martin sold the company, as he knew this was common practice to happen. John then became concerned that the VP of Access Graphics was trying to take his job, and John even suspected him of the crime. However, the VP had an airtight alibi and was out of the country with his girlfriend over the holidays. This situation with Merrick, Jeff Merrick, I believe, filing a complaint with Lockheed Martin against John Ramsey and Don Paul. I think Don Paul was related to John Ramsey. He was the grandfather of JonBenet, I believe. But Merrick had filed a complaint saying here with Lockheed Martin against John Ramsey and Don Paul for an ethics violation, which likely didn't help John feel more secure. And so once I know that maybe John did what I assumed, I guess my assumption is that John wanted to leave. I'm assuming that John wanted to leave. And I was assuming that they had paid him a pretty penny for his services. I mean, you did well coming out of the 80s, the late 80s and into the early 90s, I think at 89 to 91, getting in with Lockheed Martin, keeping the company about 4 or 5 years into 96, and then getting ready for the sale to GE. Right. So I think and they kept you on as CEO and president, and maybe they said, hey, we're about to sell it off to GE. But the thing about it is the decision on what you're going to do and where you're going to be is always going to be up to the host company. It's going to be up to GE. I remember working for a startup company for a little bit, and the two founders were co-founders of a business, and when I think they took funding, they took funding from a VC, and I think the VC sent in a CEO of their own, and so the VE sent in the CEO, but the two founders actually became technology officer and something else within the company that was not CEO and that was not president. So they still had those executive positions, but they were just moved. And I say that to say that it's up to the company. But the fact of the matter is that you can still make your money. There's no reason to think that your job is necessarily in jeopardy. But I guess what John is saying, what John is telling us is that he was concerned. And a little bit of me it feels like, a little bit of me feels like maybe John is saying some things because, I'm getting to the point to where I don't really believe anything that John says. And so I know John is essentially expressing concern, but I don't know if John really cared, because an entrepreneur of the year who did what he did. You know, you put three companies together and you became a billionaire. You grew it to a billion in two or three, 4 or 5 years or something like that. You seem to be very well with what you're doing. And you also have to note that John is up in age. That means that and I say that to say that he has a little wisdom behind him. I think I was looking somewhere and it's like John was like 58 or something like that around this time or something like that. Something like that. He was about 58 or so around this time, because I was just noticing the age gap between he and Patsy. Patsy was like 44 or something like that when they were going through one of the depositions that I was noticing, and he was 58 and I was like, 58? I don't have any problem with age gaps. I'm just saying, I didn't know that they were so far in age gaps. And so that's another bake into concerns and how you run your household and how you operate. But anyways, if the VP is going to become CEO, that means that they're going to appoint the VP. Why would John be there? And I would think that they would let you know. Not always. Companies don't always. I'm not saying companies are always the most ethical people in terms of giving good warning to their employees, because they definitely are not. But I'm just saying, once you receive information like I might be laid off, I've moved here to Colorado. We know that the Ramseys had moved to Colorado. I moved to Colorado. I've purchased this big home. I have a plane. I have a big lavish lifestyle. Maybe I don't mind moving on, but what does that mean for me and my family in terms of cash flow moving forward to continue to support this lifestyle? I think that would be one of the biggest concerns for John. And so possibly, while it might be a good thing for John to say, you know what, I don't mind moving on. However, I don't know where my money is going to come from next. And so now we start getting into the motivations of what John might do. Starts to possibly play the blame game, starts to possibly move some paperwork around, starts to possibly do some shady stuff, right? Because John would also go on to name Merrick as a suspect in the case after Merrick had filed a complaint with Lockheed Martin against John Ramsey and John Ramsey's, I don't know who this is. Whether it's on John's side. No, it's not on John's side. Maybe it's on Patsy's side. But after John or after Merrick filed a complaint on John and his father-in-law, I'm just say father-in-law, correct me if I'm wrong. But John and his father-in-law for an ethics violation. And so, of course, we see what we're seeing here is a retaliation. So you filed a complaint on me. You best believe that I'm getting back at you. That's my point. You file a complaint on me saying that I'm doing some shady stuff. Yo, if first of all, I might lose my job. I don't like that because I want to continue. I don't mind losing my job, but if I can transition into something else and make a little bit more money, then that's what I'm going to do to continue to support my lifestyle and everything that I'm doing. But I don't want to know. I want to be able to negotiate that with GE. I'm still figuring that part out. This is what I'm thinking that John is saying. John is saying, I'm still figuring that part out. But as I'm figuring it out, I got my father-in-law that's got my back and will support me. We can sit in the back. We can sit in the house, and he'll come over to the house and we'll talk about how we want to navigate this changing landscape. And I know my father-in-law will have my back. However, I don't need anybody coming from the outside and possibly ruining my plans. So as a way to take advantage of a situation, because it could be the case, and I don't know why John wouldn't ask directly or straight up. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. I haven't seen that in any transcripts, but I don't